Good evening and welcome to Current Issues. I'm your host, Hisham Tilawi. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, a lesson in history. We're going to be talking about not the election, not Obama and Romney, not what is going on in the Middle East, something related to that. We will be talking about World War I. Now, how could that be related to Obama, Romney, and what is going on in the Middle East today? Very simple. We're going to be talking about 1917, the year the United States entered the war, the First World War, after years of saying we are going to remain neutral. Because after all, we were actually dealing with all sides, including Germany. But in 1917, we entered the war. Woodrow Wilson. See, on live shows, your brain closes. He very much had, that's him, very much had his mindset that he was not going to drag the United States or bring the United States into the war. But it actually happened. Now, how did that happen? Well, in history, they taught us that it was the sinking of the Lusitania. Remember the British ship that Germany actually sunk? That's what they told us. That's why the United States decided to enter World War I. Well, that's like the major reason that historians and politicians say, besides other things. You know, one of the other reasons they say that the United States entered the war, that because England and France owed us so much money, credits that they had purchased, weapons, etc., supplies for the war, that they owed us so much money and we could not have them lose the war. So, wait a minute. To get the money that France and England owed us, we go into war and we pay more money. By the way, that war cost, and it was Woodrow Wilson, by the way, that war cost us 126,000 Americans. That's a lot. The Vietnam War, it was 54,000. 350,000 total casualties on the side of the United States. And it was not there from the beginning of the war. Now remember, the war started back in 1914, and we entered the war in 1917 on the side of England. So what happened? Why did we enter the war? Now, of course, forget about the Lusitania, because that was in 1915, and it wasn't going to take us 2 years to make up our mind to actually go there. And the thing about, we entered there because we needed we need to get our money, because if France and England lose the war, then no, that's a bunch of BS. Well, the real reason, ladies and gentlemen, because of something that England offered the Zionist organization. Yes, believe it or not. On the 2nd of November, which is tomorrow, back in 1917, the British government offered what is known, you probably never heard of this, the Balfour Declaration. Sir Arthur Balfour sent a letter to Walter Rothschild, and in the letter they very much told Walter Rothschild that the British government, now this was in 1917, and the British government did not, this is Walter Rothschild, he is a Zionist Jew from England, that the British government, through its Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour, sent them this declaration and told them very much. We will read the declaration for you a little bit later. But in exchange for a secret negotiation, secret agreement took place between the British and the Zionist Jews on both sides of the ocean, in England and in the United States. The secret agreement was with England that if you Jews can bring the United States on our side to fight the war, we will offer you Palestine. Yes, just as simple as that. That is the main reason of why the United States entered the war. Now, they did not know that. Even the United States government did not know that. But the United States government was influenced by these Zionists. One of them actually is Louis Brandeis, who was United States Supreme Justice. He was a Zionist Jew back in 1917, had a lot of influence on Woodrow. And it was an election year. You see what is happening, why I said Obama and Romney and the Middle East, because everything since then, it has been wars for Israel, starting with the First World War, then the Second World War, and now the Iraqi War, the Middle Eastern Spring that is happening right now. The United States has been dragged into these wars for the benefit of Israel. So just to summarize what we have said so far, the British were losing the war big time. Germany was winning the war against France and England. The only way England can survive is if the United States comes in and helps in the war efforts. Well, how do we get the United States when the people in the United States did not want to have anything to do with that war because it was not their war? The politicians did not want to touch that war because it was an election year. And Woodrow would not want to actually be caught in that. The only way is political pressure. You get everybody working in the United States, those who actually owned the newspapers back then, those who owned the banks back then, money, it's very much today. The media got to work for the Zionists. Bankers got to work for the Zionists. They went out hitting the roads, the political road. And sure enough, the United States entered the war. You know, the United States had to initiate draft 3 times that year. 3 times. At first it was those who were 21 to 35. Twice they did that. And then the second time it was 18 to 45 because we needed it was not wars back then, it was fought. Yeah, sure, there were cannons and tanks and all that stuff, but you needed a lot of soldiers, foot soldiers, to actually gain territories. 43 million Americans were drafted. 43 million Americans were drafted. That is, at that time, it was 1/4 of the population. 1/4 of the population was in the army to go to war for one single reason. It's mind-boggling when you think of this. Wait a minute. The United States lost 126,000. But I thought we were going there for democracy. That's, by the way, how the president sold the American people. Just like how Bush sold the Iraqi war to you, that they hate our freedom. We are fighting for our freedom. Now, I'm sure this is new information for many of you listening to me tonight, that we went to First World War because of Israel. And by the way, Israel wasn't even established back then. This was in 1917. Israel was established in 1948, but they were working, the Zionists were working through governments, through the British government, through the American government, through governments all over, to facilitate the theft of Palestine from the Palestinians. So British, England, Britain was losing the war. They made a secret pact with the Zionists. They made a secret pact with the Zionist bankers, with the Zionist organization that had people in the highest places in the United States and in England. I mean, their main guy in the United States was Louis Brandeis, a justice of the United States Supreme Court, very influential person, and many other people. In England, they were even more. They had infiltrated the British government in scores, big time, because that was their power base in England. Before they moved it after the war, they moved their power base to the United States. See, they don't teach history the right way. They teach history the way to cover up what they have done. To cover up what they have done. What are they going to tell you? That, oh yeah, we went to war so Israel can become Israel. So the Jews around the world can get that piece of land called Palestine. Now, in 1917, this is the letter that Lord Arthur Balfour actually had sent to Walter Rothschild. And we'll put that on the screen, and we're going to read it for you because it's a little bit, that's the original letter, by the way, and it's a little bit hard to read, but it says, Dear Lord Rothschild, I have much pleasure in conveying to you, on behalf of His Majesty's government, the following declaration of sympathy with the Jewish Zionist aspirations, which has been submitted to and approved by the Cabinet. His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object. It being clearly understood that nothing will be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, meaning the Palestinians, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. I should be grateful if you would bring this declaration to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation. Sir Arthur James Balfour. Now, at that time, ladies and gentlemen, so England offered in this letter that you just saw, the original letter, it offered a country, a land called Palestine that it did not have, to people who don't deserve it, because the Palestinians were living on that land. The problem between the Israelis and the Palestinians of today, it originated in that letter. It originated then. History of the world would have been totally different if the United States did not enter the war, the First World War, on the side of England. So England, because saw a chance that to bring the United States so it can save its own. So what if it gives a country that did not belong to it? So what? Big deal. Right? So if the Zionists don't want, because the Zionists already in the United States, they're already in England, they're already all over. But they have been wanting to establish a homeland in Palestine. England was losing the war. The secret was, look, if you bring, because in 1917, before England actually went and took over Palestine, Palestine was part of the Ottoman Empire. Palestine was inhabited by the Palestinians, by the Arabs. That's why the letter, and look what the letter said, that nothing should prejudice the civil and religious rights of the existing non-Jewish communities. You know, when you read that, you think, oh, they were just non-Jewish communities, as if it wasn't people. There was not people there, non-Jewish communities, and even though Jews did not exist back then, very little in numbers, it was mainly the Arabs, the Palestinians, the Christians and the Muslims, with some Jews. They all lived there together in coexistence, peaceful, in harmony. Not like we see it today, where the Jews on one side and the Muslims and the Christians on another side. All three of them, before these European Jews, conned the United States into going to war. You know, it's just like they did not tell you that we're going to destroy Iraq for Israel, even though our politicians knew it. Our politicians, they knew that Saddam Hussein did not have weapons of mass destruction, but that was a war for Israel. That was not the first war for Israel. The Second World War, the First World War. To shed some more light on what we're talking about, we have a couple of videos that we are going to show you that might, I guess, make this whole thing clear to you, because tomorrow is an anniversary that Palestinians commemorate every year. Every year they commemorate this. But you did not know that this country went to war in exchange for that declaration. We bring the United States into war, you give us Palestine when you win the war. Because the United States guaranteed, if the United States entered the war, 43 million in the draft, 2 million went over there, 2 point something millions went over there, 350,000 casualties, 126,000 dead Americans. That's the cost of Israel. This bastard state that is called Israel, that is the cost, that was the cost of that. The cost of the Balfour Declaration was 126,000 Americans dead. And Americans still continue dying for Israel without them even knowing it. They always give you this bunch of BS. At first, World War I, oh, we want to protect democracy, because if we let Germany do this, then they're going to come to us and we all going to be Germans. So that was the fear. That was the fear. That democracies in Europe going to be part of the past, and it's only a matter of time before they come to us, and then we are going to be sitting under dictatorships. So, well, of course, you know, they scared the heck out of you back then in 1917. And by the way, people did not really buy it. People in the United States did not really buy this BS with World War I, and they did not go for the draft. That's why they had to do it 3 times, and then it was mandatory. If you did not go, you are going to jail. On top of that, if you were a man 18 years of age to 45 years of age, present on American soil, regardless if you were an American citizen or not, you were drafted into the war. You want to know something else? You did not even have to register. You go in and they ship you out. Don't think they can go through 126,000 men in 1 year, 350,000 by sitting there and registering these people. Draft card, boom, that's it, let's go. Let's play the video, the first one.
Now the war, World War I, in which the United States participated, had absolutely no reason to be our war. We went in there, we were railroaded into it. If I can be vulgar, we were suckered into that war merely so that the Zionists of the world could obtain Palestine. Now, that is something that the people in the United States have never been told. They never knew why we went into World War I. Now what happened? After we got into the war, the Zionists went to Great Britain and they said, well, we performed our part of the agreement. Let's have something in writing that shows that you are going to keep your bargain and give us Palestine after you win the war. Because they didn't know whether the war would last another year or another 10 years. So they started to work out a receipt. The receipt took the form of a letter, and it was worded in very cryptic language so that the world at large wouldn't know what it was all about. And that was called the Balfour Declaration. The Balfour Declaration was merely Great Britain's promise to pay the Zionists what they had agreed upon as a consideration for getting the United States into the war. So this great Balfour Declaration that you hear so much about is just as phony as a $3 bill, and I don't think I can make it more emphatic than that. Now, that is where all the trouble started. The United States was in the war. The United States crushed Germany. We went in there, and it's history, you know what happened. Now, when the war was ended, and the Germans went to Paris, to the Paris Peace Conference in 1919, there were 117 Jews there as a delegation representing the Jews, headed by Bernard Baruch. I was there, I ought to know. Now what happened? The Jews at that peace conference, when they were cutting up Germany and parceling out Europe to all these nations that claimed a right to a certain part of European territory, the Jews said, how about Palestine for us? And they produced, for the first time, to the knowledge of Germans, this Balfour Declaration. So the Germans, for the first time, realized, oh, that was the game. That's why the United States came into the war. And the Germans, for the first time, realized that they were defeated. They suffered this terrific reparations that was slapped onto them because the Zionists wanted Palestine. And they were determined to get it at any cost. Now that brings us up to another very interesting point. When the Germans realized this, they naturally resented it. Up to that time, the Jews had never been better off in any country in the world than they had been in Germany. You had Mr. Rathenau there, who was maybe 100 times as important in industry and finance as Bernard Baruch in this country. You had Mr. Berlin, who owned the two big steamship lines, the North German Lloyd and the Hamburg American line, thank you. You had Mr. Blythe, who was the banker for the Hohenzollern family. You had the Warburgs in Hamburg, who were the big merchant bankers, the biggest in the world. The Jews were doing very well in Germany. No question about that. Now, the Germans felt, well, that was quite a sellout. It was a sellout that I can best compare. Suppose the United States was at war today with the Soviet Union. And we were winning. And we told the Soviet Union, well, let's quit. We offer you peace terms. Let's forget the whole thing. And all of a sudden, Red China came into the war as an ally of the Soviet Union. And throwing them into the war brought about our defeat. A crushing defeat, with a reparation the likes of which man's imagination cannot encompass. Imagine, then, if we found out that it was the Chinese in this country, our Chinese citizens, who all the time we thought they were loyal citizens working with us, were selling us out to the Soviet Union, and it was through them that Red China was brought into the war against us. How would we feel in the United States against Chinese? I don't think one of them would dare show its face on any street. There wouldn't be lampposts enough convenient to take care of them. Imagine how we would feel. Well, that's how the Germans felt towards these Jews. We've been so nice to them, and from 1905 on, when the first communist revolution in Russia failed, and the Jews had to scramble out of Russia, they all went to Germany, and Germany gave them refuge, and they were treated very nicely. And here, they sold Germany down the river for no reason at all, other than they wanted Palestine as a so-called Jewish commonwealth.
There you have it. So, back in 1919, that's when the Paris Peace Conference with Woodrow Wilson, actually, who facilitated that. There were 117 Jews representing the Zionist organizations and telling these victors, hey, look, we have this document from the British government. I mean, you're dividing England, I mean, you're dividing Germany and dividing Poland and dividing this and that. Well, give us our part, you know, and this is what we have. And that's when Germany actually found out. Probably maybe that's when the United States actually found out why it actually went to war. But what is Wilson was going to do? Come back over here and say, you know what? They suckered us in. We were conned. We were fooled. They were thriving in Germany. They were supposed to be Germans. Their loyalty was supposed to be for Germany. But they sold Germany out for their own because they wanted Palestine. And they used to call it Palestine, and actually in Arabic it's Palestine. So long time, like in the early 1920s, even American speaking, English speaking people, they used to say Palestine. When are they going to sell out the United States, or actually have they done so? In my opinion, I think they have done so. They enjoyed making money in Germany, but yet they were in secret negotiations with England. You know, England was actually talking to Germany to end the war. England was talking to Germany to end the war because England was beaten bad and they were talking about peace. England and Germany were talking about peace when the Zionists came up and said, well, wait a minute, hold on. We got something for you. We have a way for you to win this war. We can bring the United States into the war that will help you win the war if you give us Palestine. And that's what happened. Is it worth 126,000 Americans? Is it worth the billions of dollars we spent on that war? Now, I want to bring you back only to 2003. We went and destroyed a country called Iraq and killed 1 million Iraqis for Israel. For Israel. We went and destroyed Arab countries like Libya, killed their leader for Israel. We are helping sending these groups into Syria. Don't get me wrong, the Syrian people, all the Arab people living in those countries, they have legit requests, legit rights, concerns. They have been living under dictators for a long time, so there's no question about these dictatorships has to go. But they didn't go the right way. They didn't go because these people went out there. No, they went because if they did not go like Mubarak, the United States went and took him out militarily. The United States is helping those in Syria to take out this government so they can install governments friendly to Israel, where Israel can control these governments, because Israel cannot control these other governments. Because Israel wants to flex its muscles openly in the Middle East. It could not do it while these separate countries actually made up one thing, one power called the Arab world. They had to chop it up into, because you can manage small chunks better than you manage a collective. It started in Iraq. And that was their plan, by the way. I'm not telling you. Now it's done. But they wrote it 40 years ago and they said that's what we're going to do, and that's the reason why we're doing it. And you got our president, George Bush, came out to you and said, they're evildoers. We have to go and kill them on their streets before they come and kill us on our streets to protect our liberties. They hate us because of our freedom. They hate our freedom. Well, of course, that's something, number one, we got to go there and kill them. So that's pretty good reason for you to say yes. They hate us. Okay, the media played their role, just like the media played the role in World War I and World War II. The media had to do that. All these posters that the army put out back in World War I, they forced the Americans to go to war in World War I. How long are they going to get away with this? How long? For a long time to come. Because the power grip that they have is so strong. It's much stronger than our government. It's much stronger. The reason is our political system. Don't think they care if it's Romney or Obama, because both of these guys are killing each other to actually bend over backwards to please those in Jerusalem and those in New York. Because they know who can put them in the White House. They know that without the power, without the Jewish lobby, without Jewish money, without Jewish influence in the media, because the media can destroy them. So it doesn't matter. Just go out there and play this thing where the American people will feel good on election day that we fought in World War I to keep the right to vote. Really? Really? You fought in World War I to establish Israel, to get the Balfour Declaration. All you do when you go to the polls in November, which is coming up in a couple of weeks, all you do is couple of weeks. That's not even that much, that long. You go to put your stamp of legitimacy, the people's legitimacy on their selections. Because you know what Romney said he will do for Israel, and you know what Obama already has done for Israel. Yeah. Got rid of a lot of those dictators in the Arab world. So it doesn't matter. It does not matter. It might matter, and they don't care, for you for domestic purposes of who gets in. If you get to keep Obamacare, or if you get to go with Romney and he will get that off, and etc., etc. So that's what you care about. But as far as they're concerned, they got them. They got both of them. And they told this to many, many congressmen and women, senators. They'll tell them, look, we don't care what you do in domestic things. But when it comes to foreign policy, that's ours. You do what we tell you. That's why you will find them split on every issue that has to deal with your life here. But your life overseas, sending your children to fight Israel's war and Zionist wars, that's not your decision. That's the Jewish lobby's decision in the United States and around the world. That is Israel's decision of when the United States goes to war, and where and how, and etc., etc. We have another video for you. Let's do it.
In 1917, Lord Allenby conquered the Holy Land, and the Jews were promised a national home in Palestine by the Earl of Balfour, a policy endorsed by Woodrow Wilson and by the League of Nations, which made Palestine a British mandate.
In 1921, Winston Churchill, as Secretary of State for the Colonies, arrived in Palestine. He created a separate Arab emirate east of the river. Palestine was now divided.
Okay? Now, after the war, the British and the French had already decided, before the war even ended, of how to split those countries in the Middle East. So they decided, this is Iraq, this is Syria, you take Syria, I take Iraq, you take that, I'll take Jordan, and in Jordan, they actually, well, because, see, at that time, England, when they promised Palestine to the Jews, they also promised it to the Arabs. That's what Lawrence of Arabia was all about, when the British were actually in secret agreement with the Sheriff of Mecca, Sheriff Hussein of Mecca, who helped the war efforts on the side of the British to actually get the Ottomans, the Turks, out of there. So now it's like, okay, now what do we do here? You know, we have these people that came from the Hijaz, the sheriff and his sons. What do we do? Well, they put a king in Syria, that didn't work. They put one in Iraq, that didn't work. And then also at the same time, they carved a little bit of what was known as Palestine, and they made it into Transjordan. And that's what it was. That's how Jordan came about. Because Winston Churchill did not want to be embarrassed with the French, because King Abdullah, who was known to, well, it was the Emir at that time, wanted to go and actually help his brother in Syria who was having problems. This was in 1921. But if Abdullah took his forces, they were in Jordan still. It wasn't called Jordan. If he goes to help his brother in Syria, well, England is going to look like that it had actually reneged on the deal they made with the French. So what to do with him? They told him, look, stay right here. We're going to make a country here called Transjordan, and that's when Transjordan, and then later on it became the Kingdom of Jordan, east of the River Jordan. Now, as far as west of the River Jordan, well, that was what the mandate was all about. They could not come and say, look, all right, the Jews, take it. No, they needed an incubator or an incubation period. So the mandate was from 1921, the British mandate on Palestine. So after the war ended back in 1918, and in 1919 it was the Paris Peace Conference. In 1921, the British mandate started, England, through all the cronies that they have in the League of Nations. They decided to actually assign Palestine as a mandate for England, and assigned England as a mandate power over Palestine, which is basically, they don't want to say, take it, it's yours. No, they went there to manage it. But of course, that management was not really to manage it. It was to allow the Jews to migrate into Palestine, to strengthen, to build a country. And when in 1947, when the mandate, when England went to the League of Nations and said, well, we had enough mandating, now we're ready to get out. Well, guess what? At that time, the Jews had brought in so many. They were in the government, they were in the army, they had so many guns. It was a country, so when England left, there was a country there for the Jews with all its departments, and they were there. As far as the Arabs, well, England had to deal with them in a different way. You cannot organize. If you are an Arab and you caught with a gun or even a shell, you were shot on sight. So the Jews were armed, they were trained, they were armies. That's why we had massacres back in 1948 by the Jewish army. We have a map of Palestine. Now, in 1947, there was a partition plan in the United Nations that they very much decided, well, we're going to partition Palestine into, we don't have a map for the partition plan, but very much gave the Jews 52% of the land, while at that time, if you look on the map to the left, at that time, the Jews owned, and they were mainly concentrated in the areas where you see white around it. They had control of that. The rest of it was Palestine, Palestinian Arabs, and that was it. Now, the second one actually shows the partition plan of 1947, which is the green areas were supposed to be Palestinians, and the white areas were supposed to be Israel. So Palestine was supposed to be in green, Israel was supposed to be in white. Well, of course, Israel accepted it because that's a hell of a lot more than what they actually have on the ground. So the League of Nations gave them even more land, so they took it. But look what happened afterwards in 1967. The third map, almost all white. And now, look at what is going on there. That's what left, those little dots is what's left of Palestinian areas where Palestinians, they don't really have control of these areas because Israel controls the whole area. But that's where supposedly If there is a peace agreement between the Palestinians and the Israelis, that's what you're looking at. Palestine, a bunch of chunks here and there, Palestinian towns and villages. And Gaza Strip is the one on the left-hand side. Before you know it, that whole thing is going to be white. Okay, come back to me. So, do you understand now? Do you understand that Israel has no intention, none whatsoever, to actually have a country called Palestine unless they give them that little thing in Gaza, which, by the way, they don't like it. They don't want it. Even in Jewish religion, they don't like Gaza. That's why they are letting the Palestinians have it. That's why they are allowing Hamas to have it. It's like, look, you can have Gaza because actually in their religion, in the Jewish religion, they don't like Gaza. It's something in their scriptures. I don't know. Well, that's for Palestine and the Palestinians to worry about the Balfour Declaration, because, you know, you finished World War I, you're out of it. It's history that you don't even know. It's gone. But it has affected the Palestinians since 1917. The entrance of the United States into the war is what actually caused the Palestinians to lose Palestine. Because if the United States did not enter the war in 1917, things will be totally different. Things will be totally different. Then, you know, England was not going to have a mandate over Palestine. They were not going to be able to offer the Balfour Declaration to the Jews and the Zionists. And it'll be totally different history. The whole world will be a totally different history. So the United States was conned by England. It was conned by England in collaboration with the Jews of England and the Jews of the United States. Germany was conned by the Jews of Germany. You're going to tell me it's politics? Politics? And this sort of things happens in politics? So sacrificing 126,000, you know, at that time, these were the sons, the brothers, the fathers of real people. You know, they took these young Americans, 18 years. They robbed their youth. They robbed their lives. I'm sure those people had thought about their futures, wanted to get an education, wanted to raise a family, wanted to do this and do that. And all of a sudden, because a president was not brave enough to say no, Woodrow Wilson, because he was afraid if he said no, he would lose the election. Take the country to war. I am really speechless that they don't actually teach this history, the real history, in college. I am speechless that a nation can be conned and blackmailed, that it can be blackmailed, a whole nation. And you know, the funny sad thing about it is we celebrate the victory of World War I. You know, you ask yourself, why did we go to war then? What is it that took us to war in World War I? There was nothing there for us. We were actually doing fine with both parties, with the Germans and with the British. They were both buying stuff from us. We were dealing with both, but we decided that we were not going to get into this war because this is not our war. You Europeans take care of your problems. That's why we left Europe and came over here 200 years ago. Leave us alone. We don't want to be in that. See, that's the thing about democracy. That it's the rule of the mob. You know, it's like it's gangs with secret agreements, and they force a president, they force the whole country to actually go to war reluctantly. And then when they write history, they tell you, oh yeah, we had to go to war because the Germans, they sank the Lusitania. That's what they teach our children, because Germany did that, so we had to go there. Number one, it was not an American ship. It was a British ship. Number two, it was not done on our soil or water. Number three, we got nothing to do with it. And then the second thing that we talked about, oh yeah, we went to war because England and France actually owed us a lot of money. Well, guess what? If we thought that they were not going to be able to pay, we will just stop. I mean, what do you do when you think that someone is not going to be able to pay you back? You stop. Now, we did not want to stop. We want to help these people actually defeat Germany, even though we were neutral. Now remember, we were neutral in that war in the beginning. It wasn't until after the Zionist agitators actually started agitating to bring the United States in. And it took a while. I mean, it did not take just like a month or two. No, it took a while to actually get the United States to go into war. They succeeded. Just like, I keep, First World War, World War II, First World War, can't even talk anymore. World War I and World War II, and the 2003 Iraqi war, and then the continuous wars in the Middle East. It is all the same, part of the same conspiracy of using the United States to fight wars for them. That's exactly what they have done. And they succeeded every time. And by the way, things are getting even worse. Because back then they were not working out in the open. They were behind the scenes. No one can even talk about them back then. But today, they are all over the place, in your face. That's how they work now. That's how they work. That's how the Ari Fleischers work. That's how the Paul Wolfowitz work. That's how the Richard Pearl works. Back then, they were not. They were way in the back scene. You did not even hear of them. Now they are there, in your face. We control this country. That's exactly what they tell us now. In the media, in your face. In banking, in your face. Everywhere. In politics, in your nose. Not just your face. Grip. Anyway, I hope you get something out of tonight's program. I feel this is probably one of the most important programs that I have done in the last 10 years on this program, on this show. We never really talked about the Balfour Declaration, how connected it is with America. We never talked about how the role that the United States played in Palestine's land theft. Anyway, that's all we have for you. We will see you third week in November. Good night.